What's going on, guys? This is James Allen. I am the founder of Cityscape, a Web3 social network that turns the city into a metaverse. And in this episode, I want to talk about why you should read a book called Designing Data-Intensive Applications if you're a startup founder. Now, I came up with 3 reasons why you should read the book if you're a founder. The first one is your technical foundation cannot stay shallow, especially if you're a self-taught developer like myself, right? I never went to school for computer science. I studied neuroscience when I was in college. So I never got any formal computer science training. So this book is a great material for people like me who needs to understand things at a more computer science level. Your technical foundation cannot stay shallow, man, because managing a software company is a big responsibility. And if you try to fake the funk, you will end up in jail like that girl Charlie that just got 7 years not too long ago, right? So don't try to step into shoes you cannot handle. So you got to be willing to do the work and expand your technical foundation so that as your startup grows, you know what you're doing all the way. The second reason is that as your company gets more successful, right, you're going to hire and work with senior engineers. Right. And these senior engineers are going to size you up, whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter what's your background. So I don't want you to think like, oh, it's because like I'm a Latino founder or whatever. It doesn't matter what's your background. Once you're hiring senior level engineers, man, they're going to size you up because, these guys, they're very talented. They're extremely good at what they do. And they don't like to work for a dummy. You don't have to be smarter than them at their craft, but you have to show that you could communicate at their level. In fact, one of the things I did after reading the book is I sat down and came up with 10 senior engineering questions just to see, okay, how do they think? Like, what's the mental model like? And if you want me to share those 10 questions I came up with, let me know in the comment sections and I'll do a video on those 10 questions, those 10 senior engineering questions I came up with. But the point that I'm trying to say is that when you hire senior engineers, you're going to have to speak to their level, right? You're going to have to be able to speak to their level. And this book will help you do that. In fact, I also think this is a great book if you're a mid-level engineer like myself and you want to transition into a senior level engineer, right? Like I consider myself a mid-level developer and I want to get to a senior engineer status. And this book is definitely one of those books in the journey. Another book I recommend is NoSQL Distilled. Very good book, more concise, but equally as powerful. But yeah, you're going to have to speak to the level of senior engineers because, you got to be able to brawl, man. We know what engineering culture is. I don't have to stress on that too much. The last one is probably the most important. That is, you need to know where you're going. You need to have a vision of what operations would look like when you get to a certain scale. Because if you don't have a vision of where you're going, you're not going to get there, right? You need a vision of where you're going before you get there, right? So this book is a great material at helping you form a vision of what a large scale software company looks like. Because again, I've never worked for a Google or an Amazon. So I don't know what these massive software operations look like. So I kind of have to read this book to get an idea so that when the company scales, I don't get overwhelmed or get cheated on by other people, right? Who knows that I have no clue what I'm doing and take advantage of me. So you have to protect yourself and your business. And this book is a great piece in helping you get there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the number one thing I've learned from designing data intensive application. Just the number one thing that I've learned. I've learned many other concepts, but I'm just going to share one because I feel like we will benefit more by just focusing on one idea rather than 10. So stick around. I know this video is going to be a little long-winded, but stick all the way to the end and I promise you it will be worth the experience. So the most important thing that I've learned from this book is the concept of polyglot persistence. And what polyglot persistence is basically the development approach of using multiple different diverse databases for your one application, right? I'm going to say that one more time. Rather than relying on a single monolithic database for your application, you use a combination of very different databases, right? And this diverse ecosystem of databases around your application will let you get the most use out of the data that you're collecting. Because ultimately, if you're a software company, you're collecting data that you're going to transform and sell back to people in a real world. So you need to know how to turn that raw data you're collecting from users into something valuable. And using a polyglot persistent approach will truly help you do that. So what I did is I came up with a combination of databases that my company will most likely need based on its use case and its needs and its business logic. But of course, don't use what I just listed as, your approach, right? Sit down for your unique use case and your unique software logic and come up with your own polyglot persistence environment for your software. But I'm going to give you mine as a reference so that you could go and do this exercise on your own. So the first database that I am already using is Firebase Firestore. Now, Firebase is the real-time database that powers the gameplay of Cityscapes. That's what users are interacting with on a day-to-day level. It powers the game, basically. And it has other things like security rules to protect the game logic and cloud functions so that I could encode server-side logic as well, right? But Firebase is basically the heart and muscles of Cityscape. That's what the day-to-day gameplay relies on as a database. So that's the first database, and I'm already using that. The second database that Cityscape will need is a blockchain database. That's because Cityscape needs a permanent memory layer, and it needs a system of integrity so that, the non-negotiables of the game can never be broken. So, and that's what blockchain is for, right? Blockchain is great for permanent memory, and it's a self-auditing ledger, so no one can cheat. So Cityscape will use a blockchain database as a second type of database, Firebase Firestore being a NoSQL database. You know what a blockchain database is. I don't have to talk about it. The protocol I will most likely use, well, to be honest, I don't really know what protocol I will use. But what I'm looking at right now is Polygon, because Polygon has a very rich ecosystem, very low gas fees, high throughput. Of course, you could use it uses EVM, so I could write the smart contracts using Solidity and use their NFT standards, because Cityscape has an NFT component as well, not just a cryptocurrency and a smart contract component. So Polygon is the number one right now, but to be honest, I don't really want to use them because it's too centralized. But I'm just going to use that as a filler. I'm just going to use Polygon as a filler. Will it be Polygon? I don't know. I don't know which blockchain it will be. I don't know which protocol it will be. We'll find out in the future. But the point that I want you to get is that I need a blockchain database for the Cityscape application, not just a NoSQL database. So now we have two, the NoSQL Firebase Firestore and the blockchain database. And I use Polygon as the example. The other type of database I will need is also very obvious. I will need a geospatial database, right? Because Cityscape involves a lot of map. I mean, this is a city application, right? And we're turning the city into a metaverse. So there's a lot of mapping involved in Cityscape. And if there's a lot of mapping involved, I'm currently using, I believe, Mapbox. I've looked at CartoDB too, but Mapbox is really Cityscape main backbone for the mapping side. But Cityscape will need a geospatial database so that it could make, geospatial queries, geospatial operations like heat maps, clustering, scalable nearby lookups, right? So I need like a geospatial database. And the one I will most likely use is PostGIS by PostgreSQL. So that's a very reliable geospatial database engine. And I will also use Uber's H3 because I've looked at their documentation quite a bit. Uber H3 is something I will most definitely use because it's a spatial indexing system, right? It creates these polygons on your, it turns your map, it chops the map into polygons, right? And these polygons have a unique index, which you could then use for queries, right? So you can make rapid indexing queries using Uber H3. So PostGIS and Uber H3 is most likely what I will use. PostGIS being the database engine, and Uber H3 just being the spatial indexing system. All right, so now we have three. We have a NoSQL, blockchain, and a geospatial database. The next one is I will need a message queue system, right? Very important. In the case of Cityscape, I think I will use RabbitMQ. And what a message queue system will do in my use case is it's basically pass around game events across different services, right? So people are playing the Cityscape game, right? And these game triggers events. And these events needs to be passed around different database services across the system, depending on what the use case is, right? So this is why you need a message queue system to coordinate events across different services. And message queue systems are also very useful when you get like a huge spike in users, because it will absorb the load, right? It will create delays, it will order, it will filter and do retries, right? So message queue systems are very useful too, and load management and load balancing. So RabbitMQ is what I will be using as the message queue for Cityscape. So we have 5 now, if I believe, right? We have the NoSQL, we have the blockchain, we have the geospatial, and we have the message queue. So that's 4, the RabbitQ. So the next kind of database I will need is a graph database. Cityscape is a social network at the end of the day. And since it's a social network, it needs to basically create relationship across people. It needs to make recommendations and inferences about people in the game, right? And the best tool for that is a graph database. The reason why is because a graph database is very simple. It's basically, I believe it's made up of vertexes and edges, and you could traverse these vertexes through the edges. It basically allows you to make like multi-hop queries, so you could traverse a lot of relationship really fast and come up with inferences. It's basically the brain of your application, right? So remember, Firebase Firestore was like the heart and muscle of Cityscape. The blockchain layer was like the spine of Cityscape, right? It keeps the game integrity intact. So that's your spine. Remember when people say you have no spine, it means you have no integrity, right? So the blockchain layer is the spine of Cityscape. If you look at the geospatial database, PostGIS, that's more like the eyes, right? It sees where the players are on a game board, and it will allow me to do quick nearby lookups, right? So the PostGIS geospatial database, that's like the eyes of Cityscape. RabbitMQ, the message system that's coordinating events across different services, that's like the nervous system, right? It's relaying information across the different parts of the infrastructure. The graph database, that's like the brain, literally. That's what allows you to, there's a saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together, wire together. That's the graph database is basically the place where you'll see which patterns are firing together, and you'll be able to quickly make inferences because you could traverse relationships so fast through multi-hop queries, right? You could traverse these edges so fast, right? So it's literally like the thinking process of the database. So the graph database is like the brain of Cityscape. And in this case, I think I will use Neo4j. Very popular, well supported, has a good reputation. So Neo4j is the way to go. Lastly, and every company needs that, is you need a data warehouse, right? I didn't have to read this book to know that one, right? You need a data warehouse. You need a single source of truth, a place where all your data is parked, basically, right? All the data that you're collecting through your various systems, they need somewhere to park, and that's what the data warehouse is. And in this case, I think I'm going to use BigQuery, Google's BigQuery. That's a very powerful, potent system. You could use that as a data warehouse. You could do business intelligence on it as well. So you could analyze it through SQL queries and basically come up with business intelligence. It's very good for that. And it also has a BigQuery ML. So you could use it as your machine learning tool, right? So BigQuery is really the data warehouse, the single source of truth of Cityscape. It's the long-term memory, basically. You could see it as like the hippocampus of the brain. So that makes 6, and I think that's the total that I had. So let's do a quick review. Firebase Firestore, that's the real-time database that powers the user gameplay. That's the heart and muscles. Blockchain database, in this case, we're going to use Polygon as a filler, but that's the permanent memory layer and the integrity layer. That's the spine of the system. It makes sure that the non-compromisable are not tampered with in the game, right? So people don't cheat. right? Because Cityscape has a reputation system through the street cred cryptocurrency and a street pass ID card. All this needs to be protected. Once you have reputation, ownership, and currency, you have things that needs high integrity, and a blockchain is that spine that keeps that integrity. And we will use Polygon as the filler for this example. Then we have the geospatial database, because Cityscape is such a map intensive application. So we will need a geospatial database. We will use PostGIS. That's the eyes of Cityscape. We have a message queue system. That's the nervous system that relays information across different services. That's kind of like, the nervous system, nerves. And we have Neo4j, the graph database that makes all the inferences across relationships and come up with recommendations and, suggestions, the brain basically. And lastly, we have the single source of truth, the data warehouse, BigQuery, which you could use for business intelligence as well as machine learning through BigQuery ML. So that's my example of polyglot persistence. I hope this helped. I came up with 6 different databases. What your combination will be depends on your software use case, but that's what I came up with. Again, that's not the only thing. There's many technical stuff I didn't mention, right, that this book covers, but buy the book for yourself. There's an affiliate link in the description, and read it and have a good time. If you don't want to read the book, or if you want amplification of what you read or just general guidance, you could hire me as a consultant for your startup. I can help you both on a technical and non-technical consulting. And my rate is $300 an hour. My email is in the description. Just email me, say what your startup is and how many hours you would like the book for consulting. And I will only accept payment in crypto, by the way. So try to not pay me in PayPal. In any case, my misfits, that's all I have for you in this episode. You know what to do. Don't forget to press that like button and support me on Patreon. I will see you next time.